Hi.
Hello, all.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Julie.
Hello.
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 Hi, Maureen. Would you please do the roll call today? I was looking and asking everybody to just say here. Do
Sure.
you mind doing? Okay, thank you.
Bet. Carson,
Present.
Colleen,
Present.
Julie,
Present.
Monica,
Present.
Sonia.
Present.
Who am I missing?
Cara, but she will be late this evening,
Okay.
but she'll be joining us.
And Monica, did I ask for you too? You're muted, Monica.
I'm here. Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee meeting on this Thursday, January 21st, 2021. And I also want to thank you for agreeing to modify our meeting this month and next month because I am enrolled in a class that meets on Monday and Wednesday nights through February. So thank you for being willing to adjust our time for those 2 months. And I also wanted to amend our agenda. I made a mistake in item number 7A, new business. I actually repeated what we had on our agenda in December. So that was my mistake. And instead, what I'd like to cover is the following. A would be an update on our proposal for amending animals and fowl 7.1. B would be an update on the off-leash review. We discussed at the last meeting. C is our 2021 priority list. D is the EAB, and there's 2 things that I'd like to do there. Number 1 is brainstorm desired scenarios for Inglewood and the upcoming code infestation, and I'll walk you through that. And the second would be our current code process in regards to trees and shrubs. Thank you, and I apologize for that mistake. I didn't realize I did that until last night. Maureen, do we have any public attendees on call with us today?
I had a woman call this afternoon and she said she was going to attend the meeting, but she has not logged in.
Okay. I also invited our 2 new members. We have 2 new members. One, his name is Robert Watson, and the other is Chris Underwood. I invited them both to attend tonight's meeting just as visitors. They'll be sworn in February and will be attending, their first meeting will be in February. So if they do join us, we can stop real quick and I can introduce you to them. All right, so the first item on our agenda is consideration of minutes from our December meeting. Would someone like to move to approve?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carson. Are there any corrections or discussions? Colleen? Colleen, you're muted.
Okay, I'm not muted now, right?
You're good now.
Okay. Under the new business, it said that Member Dickerson volunteered to review Title VII, Chapter 1, A through C will be added to list of projects. for CEAC prioritization. I don't remember volunteering. I don't mind doing it. I've worked on this a lot, and I still have all my notes and everything, but I don't remember doing it. So I do remember volunteering for, to work with you on the tree and shrub ordinance, but I don't remember volunteering for the other. But I will do it if you want me to.
Well, when we do the minutes, I do go back through. In addition to Maureen, I actually go back through and re-listen to everything and verify that we've got it accurate. And when in our discussion of animals and fowl, you recommended that, and I proposed that we add that to our list of priorities and see if that was something that the committee wanted it to do. So it is actually something that you volunteered to do, but I don't think it's material because we added it, or I put it on the list of things to talk about, and that's something that the committee will prioritize tonight.
Well, that's what I think. Then maybe I volunteered that we should review it. I don't think I volunteered to review it. So if you would make that minor change.
Got it. Are there any other amendments or changes to the minutes? Otherwise, do we need a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended?
Board Member Johnson can accept that as like a friendly amendment and just go with the existing motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Let's vote by a show of hands the approval of our December minutes as amended.
Point of order, Monica, you weren't at the meeting, so I don't think you can vote.
Oh, thank you for reminding us. All right, that looks like we have 4 people approving. Maureen, all right, thank you. We don't have anyone for the public forum, so we'll go ahead to our next agenda item, which is code enforcement significant events. So recognizing Supervisor Lewis.
Hi, y'all. I don't have major activity. There were several council requests that were submitted. Some of them have already been posted, and there's a couple additional council requests that were posted. I would encourage you to go on to the council request portal and take a look at a few of them. One was with in regards to snow. There was a concern from a citizen that code enforcement was not being equitable in the way that we do our enforcement. And so we went ahead and GIS mapped it, which I really want to thank Councilmember Russell for asking for that, because we don't do that very often, and it is a little bit of a process, but it really allowed us to see what we've accomplished with snow and ice over the last year. And you'll see that it's equally dispersed between a variety of different zones and business districts. So it is being applied equally to all businesses. Should we run into a construction site, most of them, as you know, are secure. We typically don't post directly onto a construction site if we recognize that. Typically, we will mail those type of postings out, only because it is in transition between an LLC or a reconstruction. It might not be an individual. And so that way that person gets that information. You'll see that we had in December 331 snow violations. And I'm very proud to say that a majority of those, over 90%, are proactively enforced activities, which was also another council request that had come out, because we have to hand count a lot of those when we go back to do our research to see that 90, I think it was 92 point something percent ended up being proactive enforcement versus complaints. We are noticing a little bit because we have had colder weather, and we're trying to work with Public Works as much as possible. And we're also educating the public on some of those north-facing streets. They're going through and using icebreakers. If you've noticed, if you walk in neighborhoods, several of them melt in an unusual way and then refreeze. And then it doesn't melt again, and then it refreezes. So it's kind of like a stalactite. It just kind of builds in layers and doesn't actually leave. So we're trying to alert Public Works whenever we see those, and educating the public that where they can go and how do they file a complaint or a concern if they need to have the icebreaker come out. which is very simple for all of you. They can call Public Works. The easiest way and the best way to track it is to go to inglewoodco.gov and just sign up and file one of the complaints there. It goes directly to Public Works, and that's also a way to track the progress of that particular complaint. We're still on the moratorium regarding some of the parking concerns, and this isn't so much about illegal parking, it's more about the expiration dates. As you all know, the DMV has been closed for months. And so we've been asked by the governor and by other state agencies to really limit the number of parking violations we issue for expired plates. So we're kind of using that 6-month kind of mark because it is taking multiple months for appointments or for people to get in to renew their license plates. So we're really trying to be equitable. We are leaving notes saying that the plates are expired. Please make sure that you contact Arapahoe County or wherever their jurisdiction is to see about scheduling an appointment. If they call in, we also give them additional options. I don't know if you all know, for a very, very, very small fee, and it's actually worth it. You can actually re-register your vehicles through some of the grocery stores. I'm a huge fan. I've used them. I've gone in. It takes 2 minutes, and I don't have to wait in that 2-hour line at the DMV. I always like to equate it to the Pixar TV show where the sloths are in the DMV and they're just working so slow. So let me do that again. Funniest you'll get me in a while. So we encourage people to use alternative methods. The mail still is a great option if you hear from people. It is very slow, but it is ensuring a lot of people's safety, and some people still don't feel safe in having that public interaction. So we're trying to give them as many alternative avenues to re-register their vehicles.
Dave, if you do it in the grocery store, do you get your sticker right then and there?
You do. It prints the whole thing out. It prints out your registration. Wow. It prints out your stickers. You can just go on outside and boop, put it on there.
Well, I noticed when my renewal came up in November, usually after you pay, the sticker comes like the next week. And I don't think it was 6 weeks before I got my sticker. And so it is real. Yeah.
So there has been some tightening of the belts at the state level. There were a lot of furloughs and there were some layoffs just because staff, I mean, you can't really go into the office and work, and you can't really print those out from home. So they were really trying to find a Band-Aid solution and fix that.
Good for them. That's great.
As a result of the snowfall, we did do some less proactive enforcement of animal control concerns. And that's because we really tried to shift our priority after 24 hours after a snowfall, 48 hours, sometimes even a week, where we're issuing some of our snow notices to violators.
Okay.
I just want to cover graffiti again really fast because that was a very important council request. The day before into the evening of Christmas, we had a graffiti Grinch who decided to visit along South Broadway and thought it was very festive to put up large red letters on a multitude of businesses along South Broadway. And I really feel for them. Several of them aren't even open or operating. And so we've really been trying to work with them. Right now we have 4 businesses that are not in compliance after all the work that we've done with them. And so we've had to go forward and do an official posting notice on those 4 businesses, but most of them got it cleaned up. I really feel for them. It's really not a great time to have to spend extra expenses on trying to clean up on a nuisance item. And I really feel one of the businesses that was hit really hard has not been open for a long time. The Gothic Theater, and they really got tagged hard and they really cleaned it up quickly. They're one of the quickest in responding to our concerns. And so I'm looking at some alternative actions that we may be able to take in the future. I don't know if that's possible, but we're trying to explore what we can do with our forward-facing businesses in our prominent business district.
Dave, I think, Rita, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Supervisor Lewis, I have a question about the snow and issuing notifications via mail, are we getting response from the construction sites to take care of the snow issue? Or is the snow generally gone by the time they get it in the mail?
So as you all know, with the snow ordinance, they have 24 hours and we have documented. So the biggest concern that we have is that snow season. So if something should happen in the future, we're not so concerned about the one-time notice. It's more about documenting and making sure that we have that in progress for future violations so that if we do need to take that next action.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Colleen?
Now, I have a question about outdoor storage. I did hear from somebody about that, and if it's construction material, which seems to be included in your definition of outdoor storage stuff, how do you handle that? Apparently, there have been cases where a permit's taken out and a lot of material is brought in and left in the front yard, not behind a fence, or behind a fence, a chain link fence, and it's impacting the neighbors because it's leaned up against the fence or whatever. And it's been 2 years and they just keep renewing the permit, but they don't utilize the material. Who gets the complaint and what can be done about it?
So we have to evaluate those case by case, but typically if there's a permit on the property, there's quite a bit of leeway as to what we can and can't do and what the courts would move forward on. So you can always have them contact code enforcement to file a complaint and we can evaluate the validity of the permits, speak with the building department and see what we can do. I am familiar with a couple of different scenarios within the city over the last year where permits were not renewed because significant progress was not made.
Well, I do know that in one case that I'm familiar with, the permit just keeps getting renewed. And from what I understand from the code, they get 90 days of storage and that has to start being used. This has been over 2 years. So I will relay the information. And I had already said, please call Dave Lewis.
Yeah, I really would encourage if you get complaints that they reach out to me directly, they utilize the online system. And if I may not be the appropriate person, we sometimes need to go back to the building department and really get them to help us. Because using a material is, I mean, as you know, how do you properly use an item? If somebody has a pile of bricks and they go out there and they remove one brick, then they've said that they've used that material. So it's a case by case situation. And again, I think I know which case you may be talking about because we may have heard about it, but in the past we have had permits where they were not renewed because of outlying code issues.
Okay, I will re-emphasize that she needs to contact you and you will tell her whether it's a zoning issue and she has to deal with the community development department or not.
Right.
But she has tried to deal with community development and she's really frustrated. So I said, well, give it to Dave. He'll let him know.
I just want to re-emphasize to this panel, I may not have the correct answer. I may not be the correct department. However, the way codes are written, I work with so many of these different departments that if I may not be the right one, at least the complaint can stop with me. I can take the complaint and I can document it and I can forward the information. So, and get it to the appropriate department.
Well, that's what I shared and I'll re-emphasize that.
Great. Dave, was there further
No,
updates?
I'm sorry. Did you have any other questions regarding any of the statistics?
Doesn't appear to be there is any, so we can go ahead and move forward. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Excuse me. Yes, Maureen.
It appears that there is an attendee on the phone, so
Is that Robert Watson?
no. I don't know who it is. If you're listening in on the conversation, can you please state your name, whoever the attendee is?
I do notice that Robert Watson is on our call also. And Robert, hi, I'm Julie Bowden. Nice to meet you. I did notify everybody on the meeting today that you might be joining us in attendance. So thank you for joining us and welcome to the committee. And we'll have a formal introduction in February.
Hello.
Yes. Ooh.
Thank you.
This is Maureen White, and I am the person who spoke to Colleen Dickerson.
Maureen, were you able to hear the conversation that we just had regarding the complaint and what the next steps are? I don't know if she's still there. It appears that she's dropped off. Okay. So Colleen, you'll follow up with Maureen then. Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Supervisor Lewis. So let's move forward with recognizing City Council Liaison Member Russell for an update from City Council.
Thank you. And I've gotten a couple notices on my computer screen that my internet is unstable. So if I drop off, I apologize. The one thing that I wanted to update you on is on the proposed animal change. It has gone to the city attorney's office, and originally the interim city attorney said he would be able to do it in a week, and it was the city attorney's last day, and she suggested we give him a month. And so that will go forward, and I know that you have on the agenda an update proposal, and then that is fine. So the process, what you already have sent to City Council will be fixed, and then that will come back to you. And then if you have additional proposals, it will have to go back. Okay.
Right.
I think that's all that I have, or if you have any questions for me, that's great too.
Colleen?
Yeah, my question is, what do you mean by coming back to us? The process that was outlined by our previous city attorney, Allison McKinney Brown, was that whatever the council directed the attorney to do, hey, we accept these proposals, write it up. She's supposed to bring it back to us. The city attorney is supposed to bring it back to us and negotiate with us how we want to see it.
Well, I believe that is correct. Although in the letter you gave some indication of what needed to be changed. So I think and I asked about this process at the council meeting where it came forward. I said, is the process that this will go to the city attorney, they will look at it, they will make the changes requested, send it back to the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, and then the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee would decide if that met the criteria they wanted, and if they do, then they send it back to.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, this is Maureen White. Can I speak now?
Maureen, we've moved forward on the agenda. We've asked Colleen to follow up with you separately on the next steps.
Okay, and I want to say just one thing to all of you. I live in the 3200 block of Grant Street, and you can drive down that block and you will see on the west side a house wrapped in plastic. And I hope that you all do that, and you'll look at the front view and down the alley view. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Maureen. Go ahead, Rita. Rita, did you want to continue?
So actually, I don't know if you heard what I said because somehow it got switched over to the phone. So do I need to repeat what I was saying about the process?
I think we heard the first part of it.
Okay, the process that was Okay, so the end of it is it will be coming back to code enforcement to look at what the changes the city attorney made. You will decide if that's what you wanted. And then I suppose that if you want something different, you can take it back to the attorney before you send it back to council to vote on the ordinance.
That is also my understanding.
So is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay, and if there's any
other questions for member Russell? Okay, thank you, Rita.
thank you.
Okay, moving forward with agenda item number 6, communications subcommittee update. Monica?
Okay, I had a meeting on Tuesday with Chris Harguth and his communication team. And our topics were the Emerald Ash Borer branding and communications. And the other one was the yearly editorial calendar and, different ways that we can communicate throughout the year. So some good stuff that's happening is that Chris's team has taken on a branding project for the Emerald Ash Borer, and they have this really cool logo that has been designed, and we have a slogan, which is "It's Your Ash." So I think it's catchy and will be effective, and that's still being worked on. They're also going to be using a new service that they just did a training on this week called Bang the Table. And it's for significant landing pages on the website, and Emerald Ash Borer is going to be one of those. And then we're going to continue to use the Slate copywriter as we did for the last article that turned out really well. And I went through the process with Chris, and he is going to include me in the loop with the copywriter so that I will receive the different versions of the articles as they come back so that I can share them with you and we can be more part of the process instead of just giving them the material and letting them create it. So we'll be more involved in the process going forward, including the spring article. And the spring article will be about Emerald Ash Borer, and hopefully we'll cite this new landing page and hopefully some of the tree and shrub work that Julie and Colleen are currently working on. So there's a lot of synthesis to do this month. So what I would like to do, and Colleen's given some feedback back on the article, we're kind of going to base it off of the one that Julie wrote for last year that got omitted in the last fall magazine. So that's kind of our starting point. But I'll be sending out communications about all of these topics to you, and like with the logos and all the different things for you to give feedback on as they get developed. But it's really exciting because their team is very excited about it and they've been working on it, and everything's starting to come together.
Colleen?
Yeah, I just had a question. Obviously, we didn't get anything really going in the last issue, but I still think that we need to put in an insert of some nature because that's the only way we're going to be able, unless we all volunteer and get some other people to volunteer, to pass out flyers that have a return label on them. The website only reaches about maybe 5,000 people in the city, if that. So I think we do need to get something out of a little survey nature. Like, I have an ash tree. I don't know what to do about it. I can't afford to do this. What help can I get? Something about that. And also, as we develop the Emerald Ash Borer solution process, whatever, be able to recommend that we need help for citizens to do this, and we need to do it now, not a month from now, not 3 months from now. It needs to be done now.
Mhm, mhm. I did discuss your concern about people who don't use the internet to get their information. So we talked about a newsletter that the city currently puts out and ways that we can utilize that. We talked about an insert in the magazine, and we talked about doing surveys as a way to collect a database of residents that are able to identify that they have an ash tree so that we can assist them. So we did talk about all of those, and that's what I will be communicating. I will be meeting with them monthly going forward, and we'll be in communication in between those, talking about those topics as well. Colleen, sorry, I did not address those.
Okay, I just wanted to show this. I did Boulder when we, gosh, it's almost 2 years ago now. And they had really, I hate Boulder, but in this case, they did a really good job of marketing the problem. And they called it, Let's Tree Imagine Boulder. You know, and they've got another thing, and I like what you came up with. Julie had come up with Mind Your Ash. It's very close, so I think it works just fine. But they taught, you know, they got the citizens involved because, and they do have an urban forestry department that manages over, I think it's something like 6,000 to 10,000 trees. We only have 400 public ash trees. But one of the things they did was, I pledged to help Boulder's trees by, and then there's a whole list of things that can be done. So they were really proactive in getting citizens and providing means for citizens to deal with it. They have a whole disposal site and everything that we can discuss when we get to that point. But I just wanted to let you know, I'll send you a copy of this, or maybe the link. I think I printed this off of their website. But they had some really good ideas, you know, to really gin up the citizens and get them involved in taking care of their property. Because even Boulder recognizes there's not much the city can do on private property, but they can make it possible for people to have a place for the diseased trees to go. They have a yard where you can take it for free, and they'll take care of it so that you don't spread it anywhere. So those are all things we need to discuss, and maybe go into the next article, but.
Yeah, send me or Chris Argo any of those things. And that's also, that sounds like something to discuss with Dave Lee, as far as how the city can partner with citizens before we, to find out.
That would be part of our discussion on the tree and shrub ordinance too.
Perfect. It's all connected. Great.
It's all connected.
Awesome.
Oh, and I just want to ask Carson, Carson, you are more familiar with surveys and you have a lot to say about the inadequacy of the surveys that have been done. If you could give me some of your ideas on what would be a good survey for trying to get an inventory of the ash trees and where they're located and what condition they're in through a survey, I'd really appreciate.
You mean specifically like an online form one?
Well, no, I think it would go on an insert, with a little franking thing so that people could return it. And not everybody's going to return it, obviously, so it's not going to cost very much. I'm not saying that we're going to send out this survey, but an online survey is fine, but we also need to get something in the hands of people that don't deal online.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and a survey about the issue. And we could make it kind of general, dead and dying trees, diseased trees, and specifically about emerald ash borer, because we do need an inventory of what we're looking at. I mean, there was an estimate that Dave Lee passed out about 22,000 emerald ash trees on private property. We have no idea if that's accurate or not because we don't have an urban forestry department or anybody that's paying any attention. So,
Well, and
There
there
are-
is that tool with the map where you can mark them. That's pretty well filled out for Denver. You know, it's been probably a year since I dug into that as extensively as I did when we first looked into this. And
well, we
there-
need to be able to do it both in an insert and in a and online. And so we got to get that information out more directly and more urgently. But we also need, if you think that's adequate, then we could put that on an insert. If you'll tell me how to get to it, you know, then I can send it to Chris Harguth and maybe he can design something as an insert that can be returned for those people that pay attention to the magazine.
yeah, I mean, all we'd really need to know from someone is their address and number of ashes at their address. And then we could, whoever at the city could be filling in that overall map. I would assume they'd want to use that because that tool is already so well refined.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. I just was thinking we might need a little more information. Thoughts of, well, I'm going to need some help if I'm going to save these trees. I'm going to need some help getting these trees removed. And we could possibly ask those questions in a survey, but I would, if you can get me that information, because I'm feeling a little technologically inept these days, you can call me
Sure.
or email me something so that, and I can discuss it with you so I know what I'm doing. And I'd appreciate it.
Yeah,
You
I'll
know-
find that site
Have
again.
Another survey.
So if I can make a comment here, I mean, there's no shortage of good ideas. I think we're all starting to see the opportunity in front of us and the gaps that we have in our processes, not only with the code, but with our communication in order to help protect the city. So later on in the agenda, we'll get more in depth with that. But these are all really good ideas to consider, and getting an inventory of our current risk right now with our existing trees is certainly a good step. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward on the agenda, because these are great ideas. Thank you. Monica, are there any other updates from you or anything you need from the committee, Monica?
No, we have so much to cover. I just thought that I would start emailing everybody updates and ask for feedback, you know, individually, just so that we can, like Colleen said, it's urgent, it's imminent. And I just think that's a great way to communicate. Everything's documented that way. So that's my hope.
And feel free to utilize the Google Drive. If there are documents that you want to send, instead of putting them in an email, you can send the email and link to the Google Drive where the documents are. And then please remind everybody that this is basically a one-way communication. They can only reply back to you, not reply all, so that we don't step outside of our meeting conduct.
Perfect.
Okay.
Great. And it sounds like everybody is going to hopefully be contributing to that. So that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. So at this point, we're going to move forward with new business, and we didn't really break out new business between well, okay, so I'm going to just retitle that as unfinished business. And the first item on the agenda is an update on the proposal for our amendment to animals and fowl as it relates to cruelty and neglect. So we found out in a very short notice, all of us, including Rita, that we were on the agenda for a week ago to present to City Council, and I was in class, and Carson had a competing city meeting also. So Monica presented on our behalf and did an extremely good job. I think the message got across, and there was really no no question as to whether or not this should move forward. As Rita said, it's been sent to the city's attorney's office for them to propose a draft. I received that draft this afternoon. I haven't even opened the email. So what happens next is the committee we asked the city attorney to review the existing code and make changes. There were several different ways that could be done, and that's why we asked the city attorney to do the draft for us. So my question for you all, and I'll send the response after we get off the call tonight, but do we want to wait until our next meeting in February to review that, or would we like to have an interim meeting to review the city attorney's response and get back to him quickly so we can move forward with enacting this? Colleen?
I think if you send it to us, we can review it and then ask you whether we think we have to have a meeting before the next one with the city attorney.
Okay. I can't tell you if it's complex. I haven't had a chance to even open the email. So I'll send this the email out after our meeting tonight. And if you can look over the change and let me know if you think we need to get together before February. Or are you okay with the changes that the city attorney made?
No, I think the point was that we decide whether we do need to speak with the city attorney before February or speak with him on February.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, if you're going to send out the email with Title VII proposed changes attached, please make sure that you let everybody know not to respond all.
Right.
And none of you can discuss what the changes are in Title VII. If you want discussion, you will have to have a meeting to discuss it.
Got it.
Okay.
Does the same apply, like if she sends that out to all of us, if we wanted to like do edits on it, like we've done on some of these other documents, and then we can all see those? Is that?
You're basically having a meeting, you're discussing something that has not been discussed in a public meeting previously. My advice would be not to do that. My advice would be y'all review it. And each one of you individually send back either I'm okay with this to Julie, but the thing is that you guys can't take action as a body saying, yep, we're happy with this. Let's send it off onto the city council. You can't take that action unless you're in a meeting. So that's where the problem lies. You'll be breaking open meeting if you all decide that even if you all decide that you're good with it. You're still making decisions on something that has not been discussed in public for the public to consume.
But if we called a short-term meeting between now and February, would that
That'll take care of it. No,
Got it.
you can discuss it all you want in a meeting, take action, whatever you want to do, but you cannot take any action. You could even discuss it right now if you wanted to. You just can't take any action. And an action is saying, yes, the committee's good with this. We're moving it on to the city council. Or yes, we want to meet with the city attorney. You as chairperson can't make that decision. That's a committee decision that has to be done in a meeting.
Dave, did you have a comment? Supervisor Lewis?
I did, and my recommendation was going to be to have a special meeting to have the conversation just about this. I do want to let you know I did review the document, and the only changes were to remove dog or cat and specifically outline domestic animal. So you can review it. It's pretty much the same ordinance. It's just replacing dog and cat in most areas with a domesticated animal.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So what I'd like to propose is that we have a short-term meeting before our next meeting in February. Carson?
Well, I was just going to ask Supervisor Lewis what he thought of that. Does that make you comfortable with what your original needs were?
So maybe I should ask if this is an appropriate time to continue a conversation before I get into anything.
You guys can discuss it, but not all of you have seen it yet. So,
Right.
I mean, I think this discussion really should happen during a meeting. And you can call a meeting in 3 days, Julie. You can call a
Okay.
meeting whenever you want.
Okay,
That is your sole discretion as chairperson.
all right. Colleen?
Yeah, my idea was if we look at it, we decide if we want to have an interim meeting to discuss it with the city attorney or wait until February to discuss it with the city attorney.
The
But
only
we can have
problem,
an interim meeting to discuss it. But if that's all that happened, I've got a problem with that. Because that couldn't be all that happened, because the code is divided into other animals and dogs and cats. There would have to be a sweeping rewrite. You can't just change everything to domesticated animals.
So,
in regards to an interim meeing, okay, that is when, because the public has a right to know what you guys are doing, okay? So in regards to having an interim meeting, you need to decide that right now. That's where you would discuss, and the public can join in if they'd like, and take action at that meeting. You can all look at the rewrite and scribble in whatever, changes you want to make and present them at the interim meeting, but you can't even make a decision individually at having an interim meeting. Julie, as a chairperson, would have to call that meeting.
And that's what I'm proposing.
That's not what I was saying. I was, if we look at it and we want to have an interim meeting, each one of us could say to Julie, let's call an interim meeting. But I think the attorney has to be there, and we have to have reviewed this ourselves individually by ourselves.
If you decided individually and all sent an email to Julie saying, yes, we have to have a meeting, you've just taken action without the public being involved in any decisions. I would totally recommend against that. And Julie, I would recommend that you decide when everybody can get together and call an interim meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry for the circle around everyone, but that's basically what I was going to recommend, is that I'll send this out tonight. And then during the meeting tonight, I would like to set up a time for us to get together and discuss our reaction to the proposed changes by the city attorney. If at that point we want to meet with the city attorney on the suggested changes, we can set that time up. And if not, then we can decide at that point what our next actions are, but at least it will be on public record and the public can attend. Does that make sense? Okay. So in terms of looking at a time over the next week, I'm only available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What does February 2nd look like to everybody? And I would propose an hour. We may not need it, but good for you, Carson. Looks like Colleen says yes.
Is that a Thursday?
That's a Tuesday.
Oh, that's too close to this time. I won't have time to review it.
That's actually 12 days away.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Never mind. I take it back.
Yeah, I need more time too. Cara, does that work for you and Sonia? Okay, great. Well, so we'll go ahead and plan on February 2nd, and I'll send out the proposed changes from the city attorney, and we'll look at those separately and then discuss that at an interim meeting. Thank you. And then also thank you. I don't know if I publicly thanked Monica for presenting on our behalf. It went really well, and we don't get to do that very often. So update on the next agenda item is update on off-leash review. At our last meeting, Supervisor Lewis shared with us a presentation that had been given to City Council and asked us all to review that because it had implications for code enforcement. Did everyone have a chance to look at that? I did too, I know that the next step is to do a survey to get feedback from the residents. But I thought the most dramatic recommendation in there was that we would have animal licensing, which was actually something that this committee had on its agenda to address in the future, because we felt like that was important for the city. So did anyone else have any takeaways from the recommendation from the off-leash task force? Colleen?
I'm not sure that animal licensing is in our purview, because licensing is done by Title V, and it's not on our, we don't have any authority over licensing, according to what we were told in our enabling legislation.
Dave, go ahead and respond.
You could add to Title VII, because it does require in there specifically for rabies, for people to have rabies vaccination, and that could be a continuation. The city attorney can draft it into Title VII, because this would be a specific animal related permit, just like it would be for a dangerous dog permit.
Colleen?
Yeah, the problem with that is, and we've discussed this before with 2 previous committees, that even Denver, with their very extensive licensing program, only has licensed about 10% of the animals. And it's going to be another administrative nightmare. And it's just going to cost the city a lot of money. And it's just, and there's no real purpose for it.
Well, again, we're not here to evaluate what the task force is recommending. We're just becoming informed ourselves. Monica, did you have a question?
Not a question, but I just wanted to offer a little, just my little take, because I was on the committee that, or the panel that helped the mediator come up with these recommendations. And, you know, everybody had different points of view, but what's good is that a lot of these topics are now being brought up in the public, in the Parks and Rec Committee, and they, regardless of what actually gets decided going forward, this is a great conversation to have. And Dave, I don't know if it's not on our agenda anywhere, but I think something worth mentioning in our committee tonight is that in the parks, and this might be like out of order, but there's the new park ranger got sworn in, I believe, and that's kind of a big deal because they work under you, Dave, and that's a big, you know, all of these things are kind of tied together. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. And I don't know where licensing falls in, but I will say that within our group discussion, people were open to it. So, and I know that as far as animal welfare goes and helping pets get, or pets get returned to their owners, it's a, you know, there's a lot of positive outcomes that can come from that. So I don't know, worth investigating.
Karsten, did you have your hand raised?
Member Johnson pretty much answered it. I was just wondering where the, you know, the interest in the licensing program came from.
It came from it started as a negotiating tool in that committee. It was something that we had talked about in our meetings previously, but within that group, it was offered as some way to retain off-leash parks without fencing. So what if we got a special license for our dog? And then it kind of turned to, well, there's benefits to having dogs licensed and kept track of in general. So that's kind of the way the conversation went from my perspective in that panel.
And that group, how was that formed? That was people who were interested in off-leash parks, or?
Yeah, well, it was interest groups. Yeah, well, it's a Parks and Rec project. And so they had a panel and they felt like it was kind of underrepresented when they started their work. And they did take some findings to the city council. Rita can probably answer that. And for some reason they went back to the drawing board, and that's right at the time that I joined Parks and Rec Committee. And so because I'm in both committees, it was suggested that I join that. And so that's when I joined the conversation. And that second round of the panel, they had a mediator and they really tried to include all the interests. So the Denver off leash group, or, you know, the Inglewood off leash group, and then people from Parks and Rec, and then interested parties that live near some of these parks, specifically Jason Park, that was probably more discussed than any park. Neighbors who felt impacted that were not dog owners. So they were just trying to get all the voices heard, and the mediator kind of took what everybody said and came up with that proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any takeaways from reviewing the proposed off-leash recommendation? Colleen?
I remember when it was, the subcommittee was formed, and when we had 2 liaisons, one of them came back and said, because he was on the Park and Recs Committee liaison also, he said, this subcommittee is looking into the possibility of making all the parks off leash. And they killed that committee and did nothing for a while. And we had made the suggestion as a committee to ask them to please bring that to us, because it was our responsibility for animal welfare and animal control. And it just sort of died, completely died. And now it's, oh, well, we've got all these fenced dog parks. Well, I have to tell you, it's very, very bad for dogs psychologically to be in those things. And little dogs cannot be. My dog would die. But a lot of dogs were very, they're if they know other dogs, that they're fine. But once they get fenced in, they become it's just a problem. But my biggest problem with this presentation was mostly the survey. All these surveys reveal something that I know aren't quite right. They're not really random. They're very expensive. They're geared in a way that doesn't work real well. And if we make decisions based on those surveys and ignore 200 or 300 people that have petitioned in the past, I just think it's not a particularly good thing at all.
Well, if I can stop right there. So it's really not our purview to oversee what the off-leash committee is recommending or the steps that they're taking that have been approved by city council. I mean, our role is to review their proposal and identify any impact that could have on our existing code or code processes. And so what I'm looking for from this team is outside of potentially licensing animals. Was there anything else that members saw that could impact our code or processes? Rita?
I would just like to make a statement that the city council has not made a decision on this recommendation. So it is still out there. This is not a done deal.
Right.
So that's the only input that I have for you all.
And the presentation that you reviewed, the next step is to conduct the survey, and that has been approved, and it is moving forward. So were there any other comments, Colleen?
I'll defer to Carson, and he might ask the right question, and then
Okay.
I'll ask my question if he doesn't.
Okay.
I was just curious how it wound up being randomly selected homes.
What was being randomly selected?
Well, the survey is not open to all citizens. It's some unknown random selection of citizens.
I think Monica can shed some light on that. Monica?
Yeah, and then maybe Rita or Dave can even chime in on this, but to my understanding, what happened, because it is expensive, they're taking a statistically valid, they're trying to get a statistically valid sample in the mail-in. And they're hoping to get enough returns on the random sample for it to be statistically valid. And then they're opening an online survey, which, there's been discussion of that you could possibly game that survey, but they're going to keep them in separate pools and kind of compare to see if those two groups align, and if they have consistency among the two samples, the random mail-in sample and the other, and the online, that would lend more validity to that, to the results. But that, that's what, maybe somebody else can elaborate on that, but that's what I understand. I don't know if it's the cost issue that they're only able to do. I think it was 500 they sent out, or
It says 5,000 in the.
Okay. Then they need 800, I think, for it to be statistically valid or something like that. I can't remember. It's been a while.
So there's a paper version of the survey and an online version?
It's already been mailed out. And in the last meeting, at the Parks and Rec meeting, one of our committee members actually received it. So, but nobody else did. But they have gone out.
I was going to ask, is the online version open to everyone then?
Yeah, it's going to be offered like through, from what I understand, it's going to be offered through all the traditional online, sources. Or if you get mailed, how you get the emails or whatever with surveys?
I get absolutely everything possible from the city, and I haven't seen an invite for it yet.
Well, I don't think that part has gone out yet.
Okay.
I think it's just the hard copy right now. And then the second tier of that is the open survey where you respond, and they're going to ask you some qualifying data, but like your address, I think, and stuff like that. But so they do want to gather as much information as possible, but the random sample and the hard copy is expensive, and it's the thing that they can control the best. That's my understanding. I don't know if Rita or anybody else has, or Dave, who,
Dave had his hand up.
Yeah.
Did you want to add to that?
I think you answered that in the most appropriate fashion. There's several factors that are coming into the randomization. Carson, I think there is an outside company that has been hired. This is going to be probably the most scientifically valid survey that the city has taken. They have validated IPS addresses on computers and validated information from these people who have participated in multiple different surveys. They're also going to open it up to anybody. So they're going to take information, and they will ask qualifying information as to where you live, how'd you hear about this? Because we could get people from Canada. I mean, there was a survey that went out where we had people from variety places of not just Inglewood, but all over the country and out of the country, other places within the world who had signed a survey. So we're really trying to make that more, I think it's the first step towards more scientifically valid, which is very difficult with some surveys, step in this process. I think we're evaluating how this works.
Well, even if you're going by IP addresses, it could show that I'm coming from some other state, because I'm always using a VPN, hiding, hiding my data from the ISP.
They're using more than one valid checkpoint for some of those processes. So I work in a government server, so I kind of go all over the place, but I hear what you're saying, Carson.
Colleen?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to what Carson was asking, my problem with these surveys is not so much qualifying who's responding, but the questions that they ask. It's always leading to a predetermined conclusion. And I have not been able to answer any of the surveys. I mean, I've taken them all, and I go, I don't know what you're talking about. This has nothing to do with anything. And finally, I just say, look, until you can ask me questions that make sense to me, I can't respond, because this isn't what I wanted to see. I can't answer these questions. They don't make any sense to me. And this is what I want to see. But as far as your question, as to what takeaway and how it impacts, I think it's just screwing with our use of the parks, the whole thing. Administratively, it's going to be a nightmare. And I just don't trust results of any survey anyway. And I think it will impact everything. I mean, it's our job to animal control and animal welfare. And we don't, somebody else is taking it. And we don't really have any real input in it.
Well, actually, we do, and that's why we have Monica sitting on both committees. But Monica, you did have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when you see this particular survey coming, I think you'll like it. It actually has maps of it has the maps on it and everything. So I mean, you could have never thought of this issue before, and if you get this survey, it would make sense to you. So I hope. I don't know, but yeah, it's I don't know. The thing is that all of our committees overlap, and we all live here. So, and if you have a deep concern, you can always go to the city council and tell them directly. And to be honest with you, people who are on that committee have done so, because they may have not liked the way the mediation turned out. So you always have a voice, and we do have a part in animal safety and animal control. So.
But we're the only committee charged with revising, deleting, advocating new codes. We're the only ones that are charged with this. That's our sole purpose.
And the Parks Department is in charge of designating how those parks are utilized for everyone in the community.
But not for rules, not for code.
But for spaces, and that's what this is about how.
Supervisor Lewis, you have your hand raised.
So I just want to clarify a few things. This is not a change in any code. The licensing portion was just a suggestion. It's something that would have to go before council and before this body before we move forward with any changes with that particular code. The city attorney did remind me that this body is not required to review every single code that goes before council. That council has the ultimate authority, and the city can determine, and council can determine what codes go forward. This body can make recommendations and can be a conduit between the community. But I do want to say that the reason that I brought this forward and Monica is bringing this forward is because it is impacting how code enforcement is going to do their job. And I will tell you, I was a part of this, and I was asked down and dirty during multiple negotiations, the highs, the lows, the goods, the bads, the conflicts, the concerns, and I was very open and honest and transparent about this. I will tell you that moving forward with major portions of these changes is going to allow code enforcement, and our park ranger, who will be sworn in on February 1st, has been selected, will allow us to more adequately enforce the ordinances that we have in place. Currently, they are open to too much interpretation, too many gray areas, and it's very difficult for us to enforce a lot of the ordinances within our parks. And so this is further clarifying some of those off-leash concerns that we have, and it's going to open up areas for longer periods of time where we wouldn't have those strange hours that everyone has complained about, where it's limiting how much time an animal can be there, that it's allowing for coexistence and commingling and the most amount of variety of park patronage within our communities. It's not just, right now it seems like it's kind of a back and forth. It seems like it's a battle. It's dog people, no dog people. And my goal here, I live here too. And I have a beautiful son that likes to go out to the parks. We want to make it equitable for everyone to go to a park, not just one particular segment of our public. And so that's why the Parks and Recreation, this is a 2-year project. The committee was several months, and they'll be coming back to reevaluate that. But this is a 2-year plan where public comment was made to the Parks and Recreation Committee. They discussed it multiple times. And in all fairness, it's been very transparent. People have been able to make comments. People have been sending emails. They've talked about it. Is it perfect? No. Is anybody going to be completely 100% satisfied? No. But is it a compromise between multiple groups that use the park to make it more adequate? I would say we have an slightly over 80% buy-in from those that were participating in this. And we're going to see even more feedback from the survey, which is why we're adding that component to go back to council, because we want the community as well as council to be the most informed parties when making this decision. It's been very difficult, and Rita can attest to this. Several of you can attest to it. The enforcement of our park rules has been one of the most contentious parts of this community in the last several years, and it's been very difficult. And I think moving forward, this is a way to put aside some of that contention and maximize the uses within our parks and make it enjoyable for all users.
Colleen?
Have Carson go first.
Okay, Carson.
I was just going to say, I understand where Colleen's coming from in regard to some of the other surveys that have come out, like around single hauler and the increased density. I thought those surveys were extremely leading and biased and found them very difficult to answer. I'm excited to see this one because of everything you guys have put into it. And it says developed with this National Research Center. So, I mean, clearly a lot of effort's been put into making this one hopefully not come across as biased. And I can't imagine it would be anything compared to those other ones, knowing how much input you've taken from such diverse interest groups. And I appreciate Supervisor Lewis and Member Johnson, your efforts towards this, and I look forward to seeing it.
Monica?
The survey itself is based on the proposed consensus that we came up with. So, and I wouldn't say that that's biased. It's just, the survey is based on our best options that we came up with. So, yeah, I'm excited about it too. And, I'm hoping that our committee can start using surveys. We have a service called Polco that I think that's what you're already referencing. But if we can learn from this and create surveys that maybe just help us get information in the future, I mean, this is a good jumping off point for a lot of things, I hope.
Sonia, you had your hand up?
Yes, I received the surveys myself, and I'm not impressed with the technology. I need to probably sit down and do it at a computer because I tried to do it several times from my cell phone, my iPhone, and multiple times I could not get the address to pull up. And then once I was able to get my address put up, it wouldn't respond to where I was supposed to click to add into my access code. Like, it was not easy. So hopefully we will get enough people to interact and do it. But personally, myself, I was getting very frustrated because I had tried it multiple times, because mostly I'm in front of my iPhone instead of my computer. And the technology did not work well for me.
Was there an option to fill it out on paper and send it in through post?
It just says, if you have any problems, please call.
Okay.
So I probably could do that as well, but just adding in just my own experience.
Okay. Colleen, you had your hand raised.
Yeah. I have a little bit of problem with the idea that park rules are code. If you look at the sign, there's nothing in code that supports the rules. And park rules have what basis? I mean, if you're enforcing them, why aren't we seeing summons and complaints on park rules? They're always in something that's in code. I'm just throwing that out there. It just doesn't make sense to me from a code standpoint, a legal standpoint, to equate enforcing park rules, but using code that have almost nothing to do with park rules.
All right, well, this is a really good conversation. And I think, you know, we've now been brought into the loop and we're aware of what's being considered. And we know the next steps. So we'll keep this front and center. And of course, Monica will continue to attend both the park meetings and the off-leash committee meetings. So thank you all. Dave, did you have another comment?
So I just want to make sure the only takeaway that I'm hearing, and so that Monica and I can relay this to the committee when we meet again, which might be in February or March, is that you are interested in hearing more about possible licensing concerns, or bringing that forward to this committee as well, that you'd be interested in hearing that because you've discussed it.
Right.
Colleen was concerned about how park rules are enforced, and that's currently under 11.4-3, park rules violation. It is a municipal ordinance charge, and that includes any posted signs or violations, including anything that might be posted on the official Inglewood website, which has been, I believe, City Council approved that as the official posting site of notices and information. Every single park that you enter in the city of Inglewood does have posted park signs. Some of them may be adjusted or need to be adjusted, but they do include non-smoking in parks. That is a park rule that's enforced. So I can take that forward, that Colleen's concerned about how that park rules are enforced, but at large or off leash is clearly the biggest concern in this, and that's currently being, although not very well enforced, it is being enforced because we do have conflicts with it.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Lewis. I think,
Go
ahead.
One more clarification. Everybody was okay with the proposal that you saw, other than those two things. Is that the takeaway that I'm hearing and Monica's hearing? Is that everyone here is not objecting to this?
I didn't think it was our role to review that and decide whether we approved it or not. I didn't look at it in that vein. I really did it for educational purposes and to determine the impact that it may have on code or code processes. I didn't go any further than that. Did anyone else?
My only problem with it was I didn't really see anything definite or anything. I just know that there seems to be a problem with summons and complaints at parks. The rules aren't enforced as the rules. I mean, you know, there's no 11-5 or 11, whatever it is. There's no summons and complaint that's ever been given that cites a park rule.
There has been.
Not about dogs.
Okay. Carson, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just in regard to Supervisor Lewis asking about, you know, what we thought of it, like for instance, like some things aren't like hard decided. They're like on Duncan part, it talks about possibly an open-ended fence in the middle versus or is that the proposal to do a single fence in the middle that's instead of a fenced off thing? Like, is that what you're asking, is for us to comment on whether we like the plan, all the specifics of it, or I'm not really sure what Supervisor Lewis wanted to hear from us and what you just asked.
The reason I brought this forward is because it is going to, in my opinion, and we have staffed this with the city attorney, we've staffed this also with every single code officer, that it will make our job easier. It will allow us to enforce ordinance more fairly and more effectively without having all of the loophole or complications that we currently are encountering.
That all totally makes sense to me. I mean, I, at this point, fall on the side of not being a fan of licensing, but I think we're going to have more time to discuss that, right?
That's really was just one of the things that was discussed. It wasn't even, I don't think, moved forward by council, and I would not recommend having that conversation with council or council entertaining that idea as part of this package, because it is more complex than just changing a few locations where animals are being allowed to use park facilities and how those are being used. I think that is a more complex issue that would require a rewrite in the code, and I would really garnish public input on that and how that would go forward. It was just an idea that was brought forward, like Monica said. We're really having a struggle with people utilizing our facilities that do not live in Inglewood. And so they were really looking at a special, like Boulder does, special permitting to utilize certain off-leash parks. And if you didn't live in the city of Inglewood, you would pay a higher fee to utilize our parks. A perfect example is Canine Corral. I would say a majority of the users that use that facility do not live within the city of Inglewood.
I see. I mean, I like what you're saying about separating licensing out from it. And that, because, you know, the whole plan that all these people work together to come up with how to equitably use the parks, that makes sense. I know that's a lot of people that were involved with, you know, opposite interests, and you've gotten 80% buy-in. I mean, that's huge. I think, yes, let's have the rest of the public be able to, you know, put their input in with the survey, but I do think licensing is a bigger separate thing, and I would like to see that addressed as a separate thing from all of the park reorganization.
Okay. All right. Sonia.
You're still muted.
Uh-oh. Now we lost her. There we are. Sonia, there should be a button at the bottom of your screen that says mute. Actually, at the top. There you go. There you go.
Okay. Yes. When I was reading all the park reviews, all the parks I really know in depthly, everything that they were recommending, I really agreed with. So I just wanted to mention, so any of the parks that I've gone to in the last year and walked through, I could really see that they put a lot of thought and input to who uses it and what's going to create the most safety for the people in the park.
Thank you. Colleen. There you go.
There we go. I had actually gone to the Dave Lee and I forget her name, the park director, and recommended a few things, because at Bates Logan Park, we never know when somebody's going to be there using the ball field or whatever. And they're supposed to put a sign up with people that have applied for permits to use any one thing. It's unreadable. It's like, I mean, even with a huge magnifying glass, you can't read it. It's really tiny, and it doesn't say who's doing it and what their requirements are. And there've been a lot of problems with people getting permits, and they take over the park and nobody else can use it. And they're never Inglewood residents. And I had recommended that they prioritize Inglewood residents, that they do a better job of signing this, and maybe utilize code enforcement and park rangers whenever somebody is permitted to use a certain area of the park, to make sure that that's all they're using and not taking over the whole park. Because more than one time, and it's been since COVID too, there was a permit issued for a 50 group member, no more than 50 people. And there were literally 300 people there. And you couldn't walk through, you couldn't have your dog on a leash, you couldn't do anything because they were so rowdy and they left so much trash. But so I made a recommendation, and Dave Lee and I forget her name again, the director, said those were very good ideas and she was going to do something about it. But nothing's happened yet. You still can't read who has permission to be in the park and who doesn't. And I think originally parks were for families and their pets, and they played. And up until a few years ago, we even had dog obedience classes, permitted use, dog obedience classes. They were there early mornings and late afternoons when nobody could be using the park anyway or wanted to use it. And they were kicked out. They weren't allowed to be there.
Yeah, I think we're getting off topic here.
Well, it's about the use of parks, but it seems to be there's other issues about the use of parks, and that is the topic, is the use of the parks. And dogs are being restricted, and people are being restricted, but the people that are being restricted are more Denver schools that are using our parks, and to the detriment of the homeowners in the area that want to use the parks. But that's all part of the park rules. So, but I think the reason it happened is because there are a lot of people that don't want dogs to use the parks.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this discussion, and I appreciate Monica and Dave keeping us in the loop, and we'll continue to look forward progress. And Dave, feel free to take anything back to the committee that you learned here today to consider. Next on our agenda is our priority list for 2021. About this time last year, we talked about what the committee should be focusing on, and that what that does is it allows us to set our own agenda and focus on those things that we think are most important to the health and safety of our residents. I sent you a document earlier today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that everybody has access to that. But with this, you can see in 2020, we had a list, and I've identified a couple of things that we've addressed and completed. Number one, we updated our bylaws because our enabling legislation had changed. And number two, we presented an amendment to animal code for dogs and cats, or animals in general, that were suffering from neglect and abuse. So congratulations to the committee. We accomplished 2 of our objectives, and in progress is addressing our tree and shrub code as it relates to EAB infestation. So listed below are those things that we did not get to last year, and they're in the order that we ordered them this time last year. I've added what Colleen had talked about at our last meeting, that we wanted to do, just a complete overview and rewrite of chapter 1A through C for public safety on animals and fowl and dogs and cats and animals in general. So what I'd like to do today is look at the things that we have left to prioritize and see, is there anything else that we want to consider working on in 2021? Is there something that we should take off because it's no longer relevant, or somebody else is addressing it? Or do we want to reprioritize how things are listed here and what we should be working on next? So I'm going to go around the room and ask people just to provide, based on what I just asked for, give me your feedback. Do we have the right things listed that we should be working on in 2021? And if we don't, what should we add? Is there something on here that we don't really need to address? Or what do you think are our most important items to address? So why don't I go ahead and start with Carson, since he's the co-chair. Sorry, Carson.
That's fine. My initial feeling is, great. I like that we got the couple things done and we're doing good on the trees. And I mean, in general, I feel good about the existing prioritization list. I'd like to ask Supervisor Lewis, I know you were about to present to the other committee that I'm on right now, the committee that's considering single hauler. And I know you had input related to like trash hauling issues around that. Are there things around that we should be considering?
So the concern that I have specifically, see, I haven't done the presentation. I kind of feel a little caught off guard, Carson.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I know we don't have anything about that in our priorities list. And I know that you have some input in regard to that might be something we should consider, but maybe it's not really relevant.
I think what you might want to consider is once the task force has completed what they need to do, that maybe you do the same thing that you just did with the off-leash task force, that this committee may review just the process and maybe make any not recommendations, but just see how it would impact the processes of code enforcement. Because I'll talk about illegal dumpings and large items when I meet with your group, but I think it's important for this committee to be reminded that this is something that's being evaluated.
Okay. So that's the other thing, Chair Bowden, is eventually we're going to possibly have a change in the whole way that, I mean, we don't know that that our committee is going to end up recommending it or not, and even if we did, if city council is going to choose to vote on it themselves or put it to ballot, we don't know if anything's going to change, but it's possible that the way that waste is handled in the city could drastically change. And if that does, there could be things that we need to address in code. But yeah, I guess that's pretty far future.
That's a good point. Do you know how, could you give a timeline, do you think, of when a recommendation might come out either way?
I think our committee it's very, very unfirm. So currently we're working on defining a new RFP, and we still have probably, I would guess, a couple months before that RFP is done, and then that'll go out, and then potential providers will have, I'm sure a couple months to respond to that, and then our committee will probably have at least a couple months evaluating those responses, and then we'll give recommendation to city council, and then who knows how fast anything might happen there. But I would say that it'd be late next year at the soonest.
Got it.
Or I'm sorry,
Okay.
late this year at the soonest.
Got it.
Not.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Monica, can I get your feedback on what we've got listed to prioritize this year?
Can you come to me later?
Yeah.
I want to hear what everybody else says.
No, that's okay. I mean, I had to review this list and remind myself of what some of these things were. So we may be struggling with a little bit of that. Let me see how the rest of the committee members feel. Sonia, do you have any thoughts about priorities for 2021? Oh, there. We can't hear you. There you
There
go.
we go. Sorry. I am not a techie person tonight. Things have not been working. No, I feel just so happy that we got as much done in the last 8 months with COVID that we have done. So I feel like I think we should just start moving along, and I think things are going to come to our attention when we need to work on them. But I feel like we're getting everything done. I'm happy with what we're working on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sonia. Colleen, how about you?
There are a couple of things on here that really I don't think we should be discussing. And if you want to know why, I will let you know.
Please share.
Okay, tiered fines. Fines are set by council and court. They are not currently set by code or in code except for ice and snow. We can suggest whatever we submit revisions to code to put the code into the violation bureau and limit or tier the fines per code for each code and bring such code into the established process of Title 15. But we can't just say anywhere in the code, everything's going to be tiered fines. And so there's, it's kind of something, it's not really our purview to set fines. They're set by council and court. The second one is code enforcement ability to fine on scene for some infractions. I don't know what that means. You mean code violations that are under the purview of code enforcement? I believe infractions are criminal. But what do you think this entails? Because even police can't fine on site. So I don't think we should be discussing that. It's kind of pointless. Because there's no way, I don't know what that means, except that code enforcement would then be collecting the money. And I don't think that's what anybody wants, not even code enforcement. And we do have a process already set up where if you can't keep somebody from going to court and opposing or pleading innocent. But if they don't want to go to court, there is an online process so they don't have to go down to the courthouse and just pay the fine. If that's what we're talking about, that's a done deal. And occupancy registration, I don't remember that ever being discussed. The problem was, according to the code enforcement supervisor, contacting owners and holding owners responsible for property violations, particularly out-of-state owners, trust corporations, and property undergoing title transfers. I don't know what that would entail and why it would be a problem for code enforcement on property violations. I don't think we should be discussing that one at all either, because it's not our job to register all occupants, or it seems like that's a violation of property rights and privacy rights. Maintenance required on rental property. Well, it's, as the code enforcement supervisor has said many times, it's the same for all residential property. There's no new code needed. And licensing rental properties, well, that's definitely not in our purview. Licensing is handled under Title V. So I think we should stick to cleaning up the codes that are a mess. And it's going to take a while to get anything through on the trees and shrubs, because when they eliminated the forestry department, they didn't change all the other codes, the few that are remaining. And we can discuss that when we go through that, but there's nobody in the city that's going around and checking on street trees. There are a lot of places where there are no easements or rights of way adjacent to the sidewalk. And there's just nobody that's doing it. So I don't think most of those priorities are usable or anything we should be discussing.
Colleen, you mentioned that there were some codes that needed to be cleaned up and updated. Do you have any specifics on what codes those are?
Well, yeah, almost all of them. But mostly the tree and shrub one. We did snow and ice. It didn't come out quite the way we wanted, but it's not too bad. What did come up in that one was that the city attorney said it's a good idea to move a lot of these codes into the the fines into the Violation Bureau. And one of the reasons she gave, though she didn't specify it quite this way, is the general penalty allows for a $2,650 fine. And that's felony weight. So she did offer the option of she said all, like Title 15 and anything code enforcement enforces should probably be in the Violation Bureau, and a limitation on the fines. But I would say that I don't think it's within our purview because of our enabling legislation, but the park ordinance in Title 11 is a little bit weak, and it may come up in this discussion on park rules.
Sorry, Title 11, what are you referring to?
Well, there's a lot in Title 11. There's a section on parks and park rules in Title 11. I forget the exact. I don't have it right in front of me. But it's not within our purview because, it's not part of the things that we're supposed to be discussing, except as it relates to dogs, I assume, because there does seem to be a little overlap there. Title 15 is a bit weak. There's the vehicle code. I think it's the last one in Title 15. That's the only vehicle code we have purview over. And that's the one that says one off-street parking for inoperable vehicles and one off-road vehicle can be parked on private property. But the citizen initiative that was done in, oh gosh, I just lost track of when it was done, 2D, specifically said you can't limit the number of vehicles off-road or inoperable or licensed. So that needs updating.
So that's Title 15 in regards to vehicles?
Yeah, it's right at the end. I forget, I think it's Title 15, 9 something.
Okay.
And then, of course, depending upon what the attorney, if the attorney replaced dog and cat with domesticated animals, we still have a lot of codes in there that make no sense and are really inappropriate, like molesting birds. It doesn't apply, it's been left over from a one size fits all. So that entire that you were adding still needs to be discussed.
Okay.
Because there's still the prohibition against any livestock. Livestock is defined as goats, pigs, cows, horses, and they're prohibited.
All right.
So there's no point in having an other animals code at all. And
Okay.
there's two different definitions of at large, and it'd take a while to sort all that out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Colleen. I'm going to go ahead and move on to member Cara Frangiapani. Did I say it right?
Close. Frangipani.
Frangipani. Okay. Sorry about that, Cara.
Yeah, I mean, I think the list looks great. I think, Colleen raised some really great points, and I just don't know enough on whether we should or shouldn't be talking about some of this stuff, but I think we can figure that out as we go. And I think Sonia also raised a good point that, stuff's going to come up throughout the year that's going to require our focus. So I think, it's a great starting point, and just take the year as it comes, I guess.
Thank you, Cara. I'm very much in agreement. I think that priorities and a plan are good the day you put it down on paper and it needs to be reviewed continually. So I subscribe to that. Before giving my opinion, I wanted to ask Councilmember Russell if there's any priorities that she sees coming up on City Council that may impact code that we need to proactively address.
Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any, but I'll write myself a note and I'll think about it, okay?
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And then
Uh-huh.
Supervisor Lewis, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I think we started this conversation last year with, what is your focus for 2020? And you provided us some good insight, and that actually helped us form our priorities. And so we'd like to hear again from you, what are the priorities for code enforcement in 2021 that we can best support you with?
So I just want to go over a few of the things that are on this list, if that's okay. Number two, I agree with Colleen. I don't think this is something that needs to be discussed. We've had conversations with the city attorney. The court as well as the city attorney are going to be reassessing and adding additional violations to the Violation Bureau. And that really is just to make it more consistent with other municipalities and to make it easier for our court systems. Bogging down a court system for a barking dog doesn't really make sense. And if somebody has the option to go to the Violation Bureau and pay a fine or contest it at that time, they are more than welcome to do that. So that's going to be evaluated through the city attorney and the judge. We won't ever fine on spot. I think that was more for the Violation Bureau. We are making it easier for us to issue infractions and Violation Bureau tickets. So just so you all know, as a preview, we are going to an electronic system that will make it easier for us to issue violations, and that's coming within the next year, I believe. Occupancy registration. We have seen a lot of concerns, and I did bring this forward, and it might be something you want to reconsider. It is part of a Title 16, and Title 16 is currently is under review and would not be, I wouldn't make this recommendation at this time. I think it would really burden the city.
Okay.
We're already Title 5, I think number 5 we've addressed. I think we've talked about that. We're not doing anything different with rental properties. I think it was more of a registration similar to STRs, where rental properties would need to register an emergency contact. And that's really not something within our department. It was a recommendation through community development and zoning. So that might not be something that you want to undertake. And again, we don't have the staff to work on that.
Great.
I would consider moving forward with animal licensing. I think there's a huge benefit, and that would be a huge separate meeting, but you guys have heard a little bit about that. The biggest thing, and on Tuesday, council did have a conversation about the Title VII and bringing that forward. The city attorney did ask for direction from city council about a review of the animal ordinances in Title VII. And they are moving forward with sending you, which they did already, for your review, and you'll have a special meeting about impounding and cruelty and neglect. That was the component of that. But this further triggered conversations and reviews by the city attorney, code enforcement, and other departments. I think Title VII with the animals, parts of it have been evaluated and are being rewritten to be consistent with state laws and with the triggering of the dogs and cats to being domesticated animals. So that might be something that, if you're open to, the city has rewritten and done some parts of that already, and maybe we can bring that forward and have further as a tipping point and further conversation. It further outlines how off-leash would be enforced, as well as defining different types of animals and livestock and making it more enforceable and not duplicating some of the concerns that Colleen had.
Okay. Do you have a sense for when those updates to animal code will be presented to city council?
So it's not going to, well, it's up to you all. City council said that they want it to be brought forward at a later time. However, the concern of the city attorney and the concern of code enforcement is if we can, they've agreed to move forward with the one section. However, there is bigger conversation that needs to be had by council and potentially for your review. And I think Councilmember Russell did indicate that they would really like you to look at parts of it. Some of it can't be changed. Some of it has to be consistent with state law, but there are portions that need to be evaluated.
Councilmember Russell?
Thank you. And I had forgot that, Supervisor Lewis. It was brought up that there were some more concerns. And so I don't know if Supervisor Lewis is aware of those things that we might need to talk about. So I just suggested that it come back to this council. So that may be something that you would want to put on the priority list.
I would say so, only because it is something that does need to happen because you did trigger. We knew that this potentially could happen, trigger review of other, like when you change one part of code, it triggers multiple areas of code that need to be changed. And so there has to be changes in other parts of Title VII to be compliant with state law now that you've reviewed part of Title VII and be compliant with being more consistent.
Okay, great. Oh, okay, hold on. 9 more minutes. Sorry, my puppy needs to go outside. Okay, anything else, Supervisor Lewis? I know.
No, and the Title 15 review, I would really caution you on doing any kind of review with that portion. It was a citizen initiative and can only be changed by a citizen vote. So that's really not something that this committee or even council can consider because it can only be undone at this point by a vote of the people.
Colleen.
Yeah, no, it wasn't changed according to 2D. They changed a lot of things that shouldn't have been changed, but they didn't change those two things. It's not compatible with 2D because it says it limits to 1, and 2D specifically stated it can't be limited.
So are you talking about Title 15 on vehicles? Colleen,
yes,
sorry.
And vehicles. And it was supposed to have been changed and it was not. And I've gone round and round with the courts on this and they agreed. So there's nothing, that was the only thing that should have been changed is that limitation of 1 off-road vehicle and 1 unlicensed vehicle. It should be, they have to be parked in such a way as it's not on grass and it's not visible and it's not causing any problems, but it can't be limited to 1. And that can be changed because it was not changed appropriately. And the city attorney did bring that up, that in the vehicle code, they eliminated a lot of things that were the model transportation code, claiming it had something to do with 2D, but it didn't. So it got all bollocksed up, and she pointed that out, and it confused the heck out of everybody.
Okay, well, so we're not going to be discussing exactly what it is that we want to change or what was done in the past. We're just trying to decide if it needs to be a priority for the committee to address.
Well, it's a mistake, so it does need to be addressed, but that's a real simple thing. 2D says you can't limit it, so you just take out the 1. And that is truly a really simple thing. As far as other things, I mean, it's very well within our purview because it's not, 2D is already passed and it doesn't reflect what 2D said. But that's, I mean, if we want to add it, it's a very simple thing. It's a lot more simple than the impound, which I cautioned you all that if we just added the 1 impound under other animals, it might not trigger a big change. But it is going to trigger a big change. It has already triggered a big change. So
Okay.
I would say we'd concentrate first on the EAB and what we can do about that and communicate with citizens, and then delve into Title VII, because that is part of this park initiative too, and we need to have that cleaned up. And decide whether we can, because there are some things in Title 16, it's not within our purview, but there's some overlap on trees and shrubs in Title 16 that anything we do in Title 11 may or may not. I mean, that has to be, you know, they have to be compatible. So
Colleen, is Title 16 development?
yes, that's the development code.
Okay.
And we really, not even code enforcement has anything to do with that, except if community development asks them to act as agents for service of process for the investigation.
Okay.
But
All right.
I would say that, you know, EAB is going to take a considerable, and the tree and shrub code is going to take considerable thought. Dealing with Title VII is going to take some considerable thought. The other things on here, except for maybe alley and weeds, the other things, as Dave said, are not things we want to address right now.
Great, thank you. Well, that was a really helpful conversation, especially in light of the fact that I didn't know what some of these things were. Of course, I wasn't at the meeting where it was discussed, but thank you all for going through that. And I concur with what Colleen just summarized, that I think we've got our priorities right with focusing on tree and shrub code and helping the city get processes in place in order to help residents with the upcoming infestation. I do think the following 5 after that are things that we need to keep on our radar, and with those, as we progress with trees, we prioritize those 5 moving forward. Nobody really mentioned the committee guidelines for communication. The idea there was that when in social media right now, if someone from the community has a question on code, city is not allowed to answer the code because they're not allowed to monitor it. So we have an opportunity to help residents understand code and respond in a thoughtful, meaningful, positive way on how code is written and help them with their question. And that was what that was designed to be. So what I'd like to recommend is that we leave priorities the way they are, and as we move through the tree and shrub code, then maybe we reconsider what we work on next. All right. Appreciate that conversation, you guys. That was very fruitful. Next on our agenda was to start talking about EAB. And what the first thing that I wanted to do was to share with you the exercise that Colleen and I went through to help explain right now what our processes are. And I prepared what I guess is a flow chart, but I did it in a spreadsheet format so that it didn't confuse people, because it can get quite complicated. But what I was trying to do was to show how our existing code is working. And I sent that to you. I know you didn't have a chance to review it, but what I'm asking is for you to go through and read this, and let me walk you through a couple of examples to show you how this works. So the question is, if a resident doesn't have an ash tree, what happens? Right now, nothing. Our code says nothing, but we know what happens. Nothing. The resident doesn't need to worry. But if a resident does have an ash tree, what happens after that? Well, if they have an ash tree that's not infected, nothing happens. But if they do have an ash tree, what happens after that? And then there's all kinds of things that occur. The copy that's in the light gray, that's actually the code itself. I provided that for you so you could see how it's written. There is an element where the city is allowed to issue an emergency notice, and if a resident is under that, then the whole process takes a different path. But as you go down through here, you can see what happens if a tree is under emergency notice and the owner doesn't fix it and they don't pay. What happens? And if it's not under an order, then and the resident doesn't take care of it, they get a warrant, and so on and so forth. So we're running out of time, but if you wouldn't mind taking the time and effort to read through that and understand how we currently are set up. The other thing is, I wanted to brainstorm with you all based on this information, and also from all the work that we've done so far with looking at other cities. And you've heard several of us talk about ideas. I think I heard Colleen say earlier today that if a resident doesn't, or if a resident needs help with identifying a tree, or addressing a diseased tree, the city should be able to help. Does our current code address that? Well, the answer is no. But it's those types. So I want to brainstorm, in a perfect world, what would it look like if we had the ability to write code. And again, it's not about code, but it's about what we want to see happen. And I actually did that myself, so I wanted to show you some examples of what those ideal scenarios would be. And this I didn't send this out to you because I would like everybody to kind of come up with their own ideas. I know Colleen, you and Al went through and did a lot of these, but residents need help with their ash trees. They need help identifying them, determining the condition, helping with mitigation treatment plans, tree removal, tree disposal. I had the idea that residents that proactively treat or remove their trees should be incentivized. The city needs to be able to prune, spray, or remove any diseased or infested trees. So what we would do is we'd go through and brainstorm all these. These are what I did on my own, but I'd like each of you to do that, and we'll go through that the next meeting. And then we look at those and compare it to our current code. Does our current code fit? Does it work? And then that will inform us moving forward. So our next, so I'm gonna end our conversation there with today, and then ask for any topics for our next meeting. I definitely would like to have EAB. And this is not the special meeting. This is our full meeting in February. Just the EAB in terms of brainstorming what we think what we would like to see happen. And then I can also review the existing process. Is there any other agenda items you'd like to see? Colleen? Colleen? Oh, there you go.
Something happened to my screen and I can't see anybody and I can't get anything up. Okay. Yeah, I think if we're only going to have an hour meeting on what the city attorney is proposing, and I think it's going to end up, we're going to have to say, we can't go ahead with this without a complete review, which is okay. So I think we need to put a conversation with the city attorney and or a discussion on other changes that need to be made to Title VII.
Okay.
Chapter 1, A through C. And I think those two things, I mean, if we can get through anything on Emerald Ash Borer in an hour, that'd be great. But if we haven't been able to resolve, or we see that we do really need to go forward, really far forward on Title VII at the individual meeting, I mean, the special meeting, we're going to end up doing that.
Okay. All right. And our next meeting, I believe we scheduled for the 25th. Is that right? Or I'm sorry, I sent out the email. I should know. Or is it the 18th?
Oh, no, it would have been a Thursday. And
I'm so sorry.
we're going to need as late as possible.
So we already just set the February 2nd meeting. I'm just trying to recall what we set for our regular meeting in February, and I apologize. 15th, 18th? Great. Okay, 18th. Thank you. So the next meeting will be on the 18th, and then we'll follow up with minutes from today and an agenda for our next meeting. And then I will also be following up with everybody on our meeting on February 2nd to review the recommended changes from the city attorney. And with that, I'm going to call this meeting to a close.
Bye.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.